Right. Hi, everyone. This is Alexander Lim, and welcome to another great year in author story. This episode's featured book is A Light in the Darkness Transcending Chronic Illness Through the Power of Art and Attitude, which, as this episode's featured book, is one you can check out by clicking on the link below. And for this episode, I'll be interviewing the author, Lisa Sniderman, who is an award winning folk pop artist, playwright, teaching artist, voice actor, and author from San Francisco who has some 50 awards. So, Lisa, welcome to Author Story. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
All right, you're welcome. Cool. So, to start off, Lisa, you're also known as AED, the Muse of Song. Is this correct?
Yes, Aedes is a name that means song in Greek mythology, and I
Mm,
chose the name Muse because I wanted to remind myself to be continually inspired and to inspire.
okay. And if I may ask, how did you get into music?
I have been, probably for the past 10 to 15 years involved in music.
Hmm.
And part of it is something that's been inside me for a long time, right?
Mm,
Starting from childhood, from music in school and high school plays and
right,
drama,
right.
all of those kinds of things. So I've always been into music, but it wasn't until I was an adult and going through a transition in my life that
Hmm.
I got back into music and then
Mm.
started creating, my own music, and my muse was flowing.
Okay, cool. And yeah, what's your musical style?
So, as you mentioned, I consider myself kind of a quirky folk pop artist
Hmm.
as an adult pop,
Hmm.
but I also do kind of children's music in the way that I focus on creating full-length fantasy musicals
Hmm. Hmm.
that I record onto audiobooks and then turn into musical theater stage plays.
Hmm.
So I have kind of a whole a niche, that a lot of artists don't have,
Okay.
working, towards young adults. So I have sort of adult folk pop and then the
Mhm.
young adult side.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Got that. So let's talk a little bit about your book. A Light in the Darkness. What made you decide to write it? Was this something that came from an aha moment you had, or is this more like a slow growing realization as time went on?
It's definitely an aha. And the
Mm,
reason I say that is that I'll take us back a little bit. So I've been battling for more than 10 years a
mm,
rare progressive muscle weakness disease called
mm,
dermatomyositis.
mm,
And what it is if it's untreated, it attacks and weakens my immune system and muscles.
mm,
And I've been dealing with the challenges and the of managing this DM, trying to find the right combination of treatments, drugs, and therapies since about April 2008. So picture yourself, it's about 6 weeks before you're getting married. You're
mm.
about to go on tour to
Right,
promote your first album,
right,
and you're working full time. And
right.
imagine you get a skin rash
Mm-hmm.
and you get an appointment with the dermatologist thinking he's going to give you some cream, topically. And
Right, right,
instead, he tells you you have a rare, unpronounceable disease and
right,
refers you to a rheumatologist. And
right,
you're only 35 years old.
right.
So at that point in time, that's kind of, for me, that was the onset, April
Mm-hmm.
2008. And
Right.
the worst was a flare up in 2010 when I
Mm-hmm.
was hospitalized for about a month with complete muscle weakness
Right,
and then confined to a wheelchair and then forced to undergo rehab
right,
for months to relearn the basics, like how to sit and how to
right.
stand and how to walk, and then
Uh,
eventually how to play and sing.
right.
So from that point, I often say my story is persevering through this darkness, by obsessively turning to creativity to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also come to understand that my story is becoming a light in the darkness and helping others who need it, offering support and compassion, especially those experiencing transformation, illness, disability, or life challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring all of this up to answer your question is because it wasn't really until more recently that when I had lived with DM,
Mm-hmm.
for about 8 years, I think at that point, it hit me. I hadn't processed my illness,
Mm-hmm.
and I hadn't let myself feel that loss of independence and the loss of, of self and that vulnerability of sharing my weaknesses as an artist.
Right.
And I turned so closely to the creativity side that that it was almost like I was hiding, through my persona. But it didn't go far enough. I had a yearning to be part of something bigger, and that need and realization to give back is what triggered my want to share my story, to encourage and inspire others. So, it's a long way of saying, I had this aha moment where I said, you know what? This is wonderful. Creating and expressing as AED has helped me to heal, but I need to do more.
Right, right, okay. And I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, you seem to be on the upswing. Like as you mentioned, you're 6 weeks away from getting married. Your career, you had your first album, and your career's
Hmm.
major upswing, and then this thing hits you like the proverbial ton of bricks. So I imagine that this must have hit you pretty hard when you were first diagnosed.
Yes, I feel like I had to go through different transformations. The first was the physical transformation. It's that point where you can't, when I couldn't move my muscles, when things are really confusing, and honestly, it's like those stages of grief
Right.
where the beginning for me was definitely denial because
Mhm.
I just kept working and I kept ignoring and thinking, well, if I sleep enough, maybe this can go away, etc. It's kind of, that point. And then when you realize what's happening and you accept that at some point you're not going to be able to continue life as usual,
Right.
right? I had to quit my day job as an environmental scientist because I just didn't have the stamina, energy, when I was taking a lot of immunosuppressive treatments.
Right. Right.
I really couldn't work anymore. And
Mhm.
when I stopped working, I then had that spiritual transformation, which was now what, right? I used to be able
Mhm.
to affect change.
Mhm.
How am I going to continue to affect change? But also, who am I? What's my identity if I can't contribute in the way that I used to?
Mm. Okay. Okay. And yeah, I mean, something like this is definitely it'll definitely make you think. I can imagine.
Yeah, there was, a lot of that. But like I said, so a lot of my process was channeling into creativity. We talk a little bit about how I've, made songs and albums and
Mm.
musical audiobooks, and I've done all these things because at that point I kind of feel like I'm in flow,
Mm.
right? I
Mm.
don't know if you've ever had those moments where you're doing something that you're so passionate about and you're in your place of joy.
Mhm.
And in that time, for me, it's not that the illness goes away,
Mhm.
but it is a place where I don't have to focus on it.
Mm.
And in those moments, it's like time stands still.
Mhm.
And you're so lost in flow
Mhm.
that that becomes something that is a very, it's a positive and it's a great outlet
Right.
um, for not focusing on, my
What you
disease.
got, right. Okay, cool. I got that. So, Lisa, I'd like to backtrack a little bit because I'm sure there are a lot of listeners here who are not familiar with this. Dermatomyositis. Is this from what you tell me, it seems occurs to me, it seems like an immune system disease, your own body attacking itself. Is this correct?
Yes. So as I was saying, it's a progressive muscle weakness disease that also has a skin component. So
Mm-hmm.
derma is skin,
Right.
myo is muscle, and
Mm-hmm.
itis is inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So really what it is if you are familiar with a rheumatoid arthritis or a
Yes.
lupus,
Mm-hmm.
it would be kind of in the same area as those diseases.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
There is no cure,
right.
but there's only management with the right combination. But if I were to not manage, for example, I would find myself, much more than bedridden. It would
Mm-hmm.
be deleterious, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
not something because the body would just continue to waste.
Right, right. Okay. So So in other words, I mean, this is not a temporary kind of thing like say pneumonia or something like that, where it's healable. It can be healed. It's
No.
This is something you live with the rest of your life.
And it's really interesting that you say that because there are places in my journey, I consider it like a roller coaster. And
Hmm.
there's times when I'm on the upswing and
Hmm.
there's times when I'm on the down, right?
All
As I
right.
described, the down for me, the biggest was in 2010
Hmm.
when I completely lost all use of my muscles and was
Hmm.
in the hospital.
All right.
But the and At this point, what I'm starting to understand, just as you said, this is a journey and it's a continuing process.
Hmm.
It is not something that I say, geez, I went through this and now I can, I'm compelled to share my story and help others. I'm going through it right now.
Hmm.
I'm in a flare of the disease even now,
Hmm.
um, possibly as a result of, all of the amazing projects that I've been doing, the
Hmm.
book and another project we'll talk about, Lights in the Darkness, which is a collaboration with more than 50 artists who are also using creativity to help heal.
Wow.
And so I say it just to remind the listeners too that it is a lifelong process. It isn't
Hmm.
something that I can say, geez, just like a cold, I know that I'm going to get through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that becomes a little more challenging. But at the same time, if I can be real and honest about it,
Hmm.
then I can also say, here are the things that I can continue to do. That's what I've focused on. You hear in the book that part of this is about art and
Hmm.
attitude, transcending chronic illness through art and attitude. Well, attitude is a really big component. We all have, the way I look at it is, we don't have choices over what's thrown at us.
All right.
We have choices on how we act or react.
Hmm. Okay. Definitely. I mean, we do have a say in how we react to things when things do happen to us. I mean, you're right. Life throws us a whole bunch of stuff, and not all of it is exactly good.
Right. So, to me, I choose the positive and I choose to be filled with love and gratitude, and I focus on those things. And that's not to say that the disease goes away or that it's easy.
Hmm.
But I do say that when my head and heart are filled with gratitude, for example, it
Hmm.
also affects relationships. It
Hmm.
affects my community and network and
Hmm.
support system all around me.
Hmm.
Because, if I'm approaching their love and, their assistance, because I continue to need assistance for so many things,
Hmm.
then I can do it from a place of gratitude, not expectation, you
Hmm.
know? And that really makes a difference for, especially like my caretaker, my partner is my husband.
Hmm.
And, when he understands that this is coming from a place of love and appreciation and that I don't want to burden, he wants to help.
Right. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I got that. So definitely attitude and creativity. Well, actually, those are the two things. Kind of like the two things I want to talk about. First about attitude. Well, how
Mhm.
would you say your attitude has changed, like say before you were diagnosed compared to where you are now?
I would say that I have a lot more compassion,
Hmm.
and even the way that I've incorporated like my spirituality. I
Hmm.
was on go, go, go mode, like an
Right.
energizer bunny rabbit,
Right.
so
Right.
much before diagnosis. I packed so much into my life
Hmm.
between, my day job as environmental scientist while I was also a singer-songwriter
Hmm.
and taking classes, to enrich, whether it was songwriting or lapidary, or it was like every moment was on go, go, go,
Hmm.
until my body finally, said, well, if you're not going to stop, I'm going to create a situation where you have to,
Okay.
right? And at that point, I kind of had to stop doing everything.
Hmm.
And because of that, it also gave me a lot of time, as I was saying, in this spiritual transformation to really identify who I was,
Hmm.
and what kind of identity. I had.
Mhm.
But at the time when I went into the hospital, it also gave me another opportunity to learn compassion. I like to share a quick story about the fact that I was in rehab, and right across from me were people who I saw as even, harder off than me. There were stroke
Mhm.
victims,
Mhm.
people that needed machines in order to get to the bathroom,
Right.
who had slurred speech, who,
Mhm.
couldn't eat. And here I was right across the way in a bed, and
Mhm.
I couldn't move,
Mhm.
and I needed a wheelchair to get to the restroom, etc. But I also saw myself as blessed.
Mhm.
I had that opportunity to say, I'm not necessarily going to be in this wheelchair all my life. And I looked at my situation and just said, I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. And it
Mhm.
was a hard thing to have to see others suffering while I was going through something so difficult,
Mhm.
but it gave me appreciation and compassion. That's one example.
Mhm.
And so I feel like until, going through something like this, I
Mhm.
didn't have that space to be able to incorporate the attitude part,
Mhm.
the love and the gratitude and all of that. It's not that that wasn't part of me,
All right.
but the appreciation for what it was
Mhm.
changed.
Mhm.
Um, and again, identity was a really big thing. It's hard to feel value and worth when somebody has to do everything for you. When you're
Mhm.
dependent on caretakers for food and for nourishment and for
Right.
transportation and for
Right.
all of those things. And so you have to really search and find out, like, who are you at your core? And that
Mhm.
part doesn't change even if something happens to you.
Mhm. Right. Right. Okay. So, all right. So, definitely, I guess you can say then that you've come to how do I put this? A deeper understanding for your own self of your own core, as you would say it.
Yes. Yeah. I
Mm.
like the way you put that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let me talk about the ask about the other topic, creativity. What was your creativity like before you were diagnosed compared to now?
Oh, so before I was diagnosed, I was just getting, into AED as my artist hat. At that point, I was a singer-songwriter and trying
Hmm.
to kind of find my sound and my voice.
Hmm. Hmm.
And after being diagnosed, I would say that there was definitely more vulnerability and honesty,
Hmm.
um, because it's almost like at that point, I was able to tap into things that were coming because of the experience, and they weren't necessarily direct. And the
Hmm.
way I mean that is I wasn't saying to myself, I'm going to write a song about my journey. But
Hmm.
as it was, the material I was creating came through from the journey. And I didn't even know until recently that this was happening. Here's an example. I write musicals,
All right.
and one of the musicals I wrote was is called What Are Dreams Made Of? And my main protagonist, Aidi, has a reoccurring nightmare and has to basically choose between light and dark, and then
Hmm.
finally identify with both in order to confront her nightmare.
Hmm.
And what I didn't understand is that I was using my characters and my musicals to reflect my own struggle with light and
Hmm.
dark.
Hmm.
I didn't even know I was doing that. And part of me is glad that I wasn't realizing it at the point because it may have changed my process. Instead, I was saying I just almost turned to it as escape.
Hmm.
I wanted to escape into these really light, bright fantasies,
Hmm.
and create these characters that were so opposite from the difficult darkness and hardships and pain and suffering and 187 doctor appointments, right?
Hmm.
So, like all of that stuff, I wanted to forget. So I would put on my artistic hat.
Oh, okay. So this is more like your creativity then. It blossomed. Let me see if I get it straight. Your creativity. creativity, sorry, blossomed from being a form of escapism to something that helped you in your process. Is this correct?
I would say both,
Okay.
because the escapism was happening for years.
Hmm.
But what I was saying that triggered me to want to share my story and my memoir is
Hmm.
the second part that you just said, which is that creating didn't go far enough for me, that I had that yearning to be part of something bigger,
Hmm.
that need and realization to give back and inspire others. And because of that, as I was mentioning, I ended up thinking about when I was releasing my memoir or, finishing it, I wanted to think about how I could share my story. And what I wanted most was to collaborate with other artists who were
Hmm.
also creating to heal.
All right.
And so what I did is I ended up kind of putting a call out to passionate artists and musicians and authors
Hmm.
and seeing if people were interested in collaborating on an event
Hmm.
that I could share my story and they would share theirs. And I didn't expect the level of interest, frankly. And as a result, I ended up creating an online community as well as producing of some events in December where I recorded 45 artists from around the world in
Wow.
conversations and was able to share their stories on how they use their music and art to help them heal, from their different life challenges and illnesses and darkness. And so that experience also, would never have happened if I didn't have the vulnerability to
Hmm.
come out and share my story.
All
So
right.
I'm realizing that it's enabling others, when we ourselves are open with our own stories,
Hmm.
then others have, the interest or are empowered to
Hmm.
share their stories. And that's something that I didn't expect either.
Wow. Okay. So it seems like doors are opening for you not only creatively but also in terms of relationships and reaching out all over the world. I, I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you'd have been able to get like 45 artists from around the world together like 10 years or 20 years ago.
I wouldn't have been able to do that in my own journey, perhaps,
Hmm.
right? I think I needed to go through my journey in order to, I guess the way I see it is I am realizing the gift in the curse.
Hmm.
It's before it's easy to just see that darkness. And
Right.
now it's understanding that because I've lived with chronic illness, I
Hmm.
actually have something to give to others,
Hmm.
and because of that, I can inspire, I can empower, I can inspire hope and courage to keep dreaming. The one thing that changed for me is that, as we talked about, when something unexpected happens,
Hmm.
your dreams change. Well,
Right.
I wasn't about to let my dreams die.
Right.
I had to just kind of figure out what next form or shape they were going to take,
Right.
right? So I inspire hope and people to keep dreaming and living life to the fullest, no matter what life hurls at you.
All right. Cool. Cool. And yeah, I mean that's definitely a lesson. I mean, for people who encounter sort of some the kind of condition that you have, I mean, it's easy to slip into all the darkness and the negativity and whatnot and think the world's ended. But you're certainly proving that that's not the case.
Well, it's easy to despair. It's easy uh, to, like you say, slip into this darkness. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that those moments aren't going to happen. But what
All right.
I do for myself is that I don't dwell there. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I remind myself that I'm blessed. I recognize beauty in little things. I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that I have and embrace a support system in my
Mm-hmm.
family and friends and network. I don't do this alone. I
All right.
learn to receive and nurture relationships. There are so many life lessons, I guess, that come out of the experience that I, try to share with others.
All right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Got that. Cool. So, Lisa, let's say you came across someone who's suddenly been diagnosed with a condition similar to yours, something that'll totally change their life in a possibly negatively impactful way, um, and you had only enough time to tell that person one thing, what would be that one thing you tell that person?
One thing.
Yes.
Okay. I would say don't give up on your dreams.
Hmm.
Well, I'm going to tell you more than one thing. That's too hard for me.
Okay, all right, okay, cool, all right, fine.
I would say remember that you are enough. Where you are and who you are is enough.
Mhm.
Never stop dreaming and always keep shining your light.
Mm. All right, cool. And definitely go with the flow, go with the process, I guess. I mean, as you said, don't dwell on the negativity.
Definitely don't dwell on the negativity.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all going to have, continual curveballs, but
Right,
choose hope and possibility, right? That's
right.
that's what I would say. Remember that this isn't the curveball is not you and you are not your illness.
Hmm. Okay, cool. I got that. Okay. So, Lisa, in the last minute or so of this interview, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share to maybe inspire listeners?
Oh, well, I feel like that, keep shining your light is
Mm.
is really one that I want to leave the listeners with. Um, but I guess the other one is, refusing to be a victim
Hmm. Hmm.
and understanding that um, if you can find ways to give back and share your story,
Hmm.
you really have an impact on others.
Okay. All right. Well, those are great words of wisdom right there, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure listeners will get something from that. Okay, then. So, in closing, the book is A Light in the Darkness: Transcending Chronic Illness Through the Power of Art and Attitude. The authors are guest Lisa Sniderman, and you can find her book on Amazon. So, Lisa, thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you very much for being an author story.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
You're welcome. So, everyone, invite you all to go ahead and check out A Light in the Darkness, and by all means, subscribe to our channel as well. So, bye for now, folks. I'll be back next time on our Author Story Weekly interviews with another great author.